pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. Before I hand it over to our superintendent, I would just like to say a few words. First, I would like to congratulate Mr. Corrigan. I don't know if you saw our website, but he's the 2023 Bright Light honoree. I think that's absolutely wonderful, so I extend my congratulations to him. I would also like to state that I am so proud of our sixth graders with their official flight experiment that was launched to be part of the National Center for the Earth and Space and Science Education experimental program. They must be thrilled.
They are, and we will be tracking, we hope, the launch of their experiment sometime in the early spring.
The other day I was able to go to the National History Day at the middle school. Wow, the projects get better and better every year. So please extend our thanks to the teachers who work so hard with our students. They can really see a lot of pride in their work. And last but not least, just want to put a reminder out to everybody that tomorrow night at the high school, we are having our Beauty and the Beast tournament, and it starts at 7 p.m. So I hope to see some of you there. You can. And that's it. So thank you, and I give it over to Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mrs. Conway. Tonight we begin our presentation with a student showcase on elementary enrichment. Dr. Ostrov is sick, but she will be joining us through a podcast that she put together showcasing our elementary enrichment program.
It's actually just a video.
Yes.
Welcome to the 2022-2023 Elementary Enrichment Showcase.
I really like the enrichment program because there's so many fun things to do and you can learn a lot.
Our goal is for students to explore inspiring learning opportunities outside the school day. All 4 schools provide 3 9-week sessions from Tuesday through Thursday. 854 elementary students participated in trimester 1, and 852 are currently enrolled in trimester 2, with over 55 different enrichment courses offered this year.
I don't care, so call me crazy. We can live. I really love math weeks because it pushes your mind beyond the limit that you think you can. I love math weeks also because the teacher gives us fun challenges to work on. A million dreams are keeping me away. I love STEM enrichment because you can make different things and whatever you want. No one can tell you why or when you can make it. You can just make it at the moment you can. A million dreams on the world we're gonna make. Things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day. They can say it also.
This is Marie Kennedy, and I'm in the East School escape room, and I love escaping because you get to solve all of these locks, and you get to solve riddles, and you work with the kids that you don't know.
Run away to a world of
I'm Grace Peterson, and I participated in the Enrichment Mural Masters. I really enjoyed how we got to paint on the wall, and it just makes this whole school a little bit brighter. We try to make it as positive as we can and as bright as we can. C, D, E, F, G. super strategies and art, and it really helps the kids learn and grow, and it makes you really happy to do. Hi, this is Samantha recording from Little News Trip. I love enrichment because I get to meet with teachers and I get to learn new things about them. And I love Little News Trip because I get to report to the whole school what's happening today, and I get to talk to the whole school. Hi, this is Kai reporting live from Little News Crew. I like enrichment because it makes me hyped up for the day. And I like Little News Crew because I'm the first one to know what's happening today. Join the Little News Crew. Bye!
Thank you for supporting our innovative teachers and school leaders in providing enrichment at Long Beach schools.
Thank you to Dr. Ostroff and our elementary principals who put that together. I am sure that the community is aware that this program we put together as a way to increase student learning, address learning loss, and increase student engagement, and we're utilizing the federal money that was given as a result of COVID for that purpose. And we are also already in conversations about how we structure this program moving forward so that it can become at least some form a part of our regular offerings. We may not be able to do it to the extent we do it now without the federal grant, but we hope to be able to put together a program that provides a similar experience for our students on a regular basis. If there's any questions or comments from the board on that?
Dr. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Dr. Ostroff, for providing this script. I just have two questions. One is, prior to this investment of federal monies, the elementary schools all had clubs. So what does this, which we've just seen, what kind of a growth of the clubs or magnification of the clubs does it represent? Is it twice the amount of clubs? Is it 3 times the amount of clubs? Is it 1.5? Is it the same?
Oh, it's much more than the clubs.
Right.
The clubs we offered before were very limited in nature. They would run for maybe, 4 or 5 weeks, once a week, and they didn't address academic issues or academic needs at all. One of the requirements for a proposal in this program is that it has to have an academic component. Now, some you can have fun while learning, and that is the point. But there has to be an academic basis to it. Students are writing, reflecting, learning skills that are related to classroom skills. That was not necessarily true of the clubs. We would have, a crochet club or something that wasn't related at all.
So looking to the future, are we looking more to this model in terms of after-school extracurricular in elementary? Or are we looking for a mixed model of crocheting and?
I think it'll be a mixed model, Dr. Ryan. I think we certainly can't offer this robust a program permanently. We don't have the funding to do that. But I think the idea that the enrichment program would be more than just a club, or would involve students in things that maybe are at a bit of a higher level would be something that we should have.
Because as you addressed, one of my concerns moving forward is just the financing of this.
Yeah.
In terms of this, it's nice to have federal money, and it's nice to see that it's being used to address learning loss with children. But once again, as indicated by parents who were here at the last meeting or meeting before, many parents seem to like, on top of what we've seen in terms of the children's enthusiasm for the programs, parents likewise sort of mirror the kids' reactions to this. And I guess we're going to have to be somewhat fiscally responsible in terms of just how we're going to finance something of this.
Yeah. So we've already started to talk about how we might do that. We're offering this from October basically through June right now. we probably could do a similar offering, maybe over the course of 10 weeks. So we discussed possibly doing it beginning in November and maybe offering it for March, but typically students are not involved in outside sports, in the spring and the fall. We have to really honestly have to look at what we can afford and then backwards plan from there. And I think we can also look to maybe cut some additional areas that, maybe are not as popular, or things that we don't need anymore. As you know, budgeting is always a give and take process. We try hard to work within the constraints of our budget, and we look to do things that are most beneficial for children and let go of some things that are not as beneficial. So we have several meetings set up over the next few weeks to start to look at that process.
So we have the ARC money for 1 more year.
Yeah.
And are we basically on track for sort of expending what we've received?
Yes,
So that come
yes.
June of '24, we will have exhausted those funds, and then it's going to be on us in terms of what we choose to do and what we think is best academically.
Correct.
Yes. We have 1 more year.
And I believe we have that following summer.
We have
So-
through July.
You have July and August. I think all the expenses have to be done by September. So, if there's something we needed over the summer, I think we can include it.
So you're happy with how we're pacing those expenditures of those funds so that they will sort of be contemporaneous with August of '24 that we were?
At this point, yes, we may need to do another amendment if we find out that the costs are, coming in a little bit different than we had planned,
Right.
like we did the amendment already,
Right.
but we're allowed to do an amendment.
My last question, were any of the extracurriculars or enrichments activities deleted from the program because of the lack of interest, or just were not? None, they were all?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I know that it was hard.
So we didn't run anything that didn't, we set a basic subscription number, we didn't run
And
anything.
what is that number?
10,
10 or 7?
10.
10. And I know attendance has been an issue in terms of the district the last couple of years. Attendance of these programs has been an issue? No?
Children are very happy to come.
Okay.
They're in school.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Brona?
Thank you. Do we provide transportation to the enrichment classes?
We do.
And
From,
right, because it's already in school, right? And would that continue on the, I understand you're working things out now.
Yeah.
But when you talk about a less
Absolutely.
robust program, would that also include transportation?
correct, yes.
Thank you, that's all I have. It's great presentation, thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to thank you for the great presentation. It's great to hear that we had 854 kids in trimester 1, 854 kids in trimester 2. It was a great number, so thank you to all.
So then I'd like to just give the next presentation to Mr. DeVito as part of our ongoing budget process.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. So this evening, we're going to continue our discussion about future capital projects. As a follow-up to the November capital project presentation, the Board of Education Subcommittee has met to review building requests and to prioritize possible projects. This presentation includes projects by building with cost estimates and an overall program cost that does not require any additional tax levy, meaning that the proposed capital program is tax neutral. As we consider a future bond issue, we are proposing to separate the project into 2 groups, so the community has an opportunity to vote on 2 different subsets of projects. For example, the first subset would be all the maintenance needs that we've identified in order to maintain our infrastructure. Included in that is ventilation for each school and also certain areas of Lindell. And then we're doing the second subset would be just air conditioning all those areas throughout the district that do not have it. So let's take a look at our district-wide total, about $84.5 million in round numbers. You see how it breaks out by the different buildings. The highest is at the high school. Then you see we have the middle school and middle elementary. We consider it one complex because it's all connected, but of course it is 2 different schools, the different elementary schools. The Nike Environmental Center is a separate building, as well as the facilities department offices, the transportation department offices, and the Long Beach Public Library, because we do and own it. We are responsible for the infrastructure, not the day-to-day maintenance, but for the building envelope. And there are some needs there of about 1.4 million over at the public library. So here we have Long Beach High School with a variety of projects. You see here we have a placeholder here for cafeteria reconstruction of about 1.8 million. This was a real priority for the high school team. They said that although the view is amazing, that students sometimes feel it's overwhelming. It's like cavernous, where they need a little bit more intimacy there. So we talked about maybe dropping the ceiling, adding some different lighting, putting some different elements into that space to make it feel a little bit more intimate and less overwhelming when you walk in. Fax room reconstruction has to do with the upgrades to the family and consumer science classroom. You see here how it's demolition, new casework appliances, etc. Baseball and softball field reconstruction. We've heard over the years from our baseball and softball communities that, hey, what about us? What about our fields? You have the beautiful turf field over for the football and the lacrosse, but we'd like to have something for baseball and softball. So you see this area has been identified. You see here turf field replacement, and just take a note of this. I'm going to come back and talk about this particular light item later. Locker room reconstruction, it really needs to be updated, and really to not only do the facilities need to be upgraded, but the layout needs to be changed. And then just some other maintenance issues, interior walls, vinyl tile replacement, ceilings, interior doors. This pool deck reconstruction also, I want to put a little asterisk there. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And the bleachers. But then you have the air handling units. These are replacing remaining air handling units that were not replaced during the previous bond project. You really need to maintain these units, make sure that they're working properly. There's a lot of manual manipulation that goes on for this particular area, and we want to bring that up to date. Handicap accessibility. And you see here providing different types of compliance through ADA in various areas of the building, especially at the pool. Approximately 26.5 million. All of these costs include an 18% what we call soft cost and contingencies for the architect and engineering fees, construction management, testing, legal fees, and 8% is included in that for unforeseen conditions, because we know we're going to come up against. We can look at drawings, we can look at plans, but it doesn't always capture everything that you notice or what comes to light when you knock walls down or when you do different things. So hard costs and soft costs in these prices. Let's take a look at Lido Elementary and the middle school. You see here this stormwater drainage, something that's very important that we see what's happening with some of the piping and the deterioration there. Sidewalk, curb replacement, again, replacing the field. This field over here, Veterans Field, is a couple of years older than the field over at the high school. And here's an item that actually came up out of the meetings, is that the middle school team and the Lido administrative team really feel that we need to do some work at the athletic fields in the back. And this has to do with not necessarily putting turf through the whole thing, but just in the infield, okay? And then some maintenance issues in terms of exterior walls. They don't use the stage over in Lido. It's like a gym and an auditorium, and it's a waste of space. So they asked, can you please take it out? Because we really need the gym space. So here's some costs involved with putting in some new floors. Here's a big item that I want to highlight, is this courtyard reconstruction, outdoor learning. When we did our strategic planning, we heard a lot of feedback that we really want to maximize outdoor learning spaces. We have all these beautiful courtyards that are really not utilized properly over in the middle school and Lido Elementary. So we're talking about really making good use of these courtyards, putting some sort of canopy over it to shield it from the sun, and making it a user-friendly space where kids can go out with their teachers and use these outdoor learning spaces. We also talked about building a clubhouse. We applied for some grant money. Are we still in application for that after-school program?
Yeah, we should hear about that by the end of next month.
So we have an idea about building an actual clubhouse outside in one of the courtyards, because we always tight on space in the building to make the good use of some sort of an after-school program, after-school activity for the kids. You see here, I'd like to highlight, again, another locker room reconstruction. Our locker rooms need to be upgraded. It's not a good use of space, and there's opportunities to make it better for kids with storage that we have at the middle school. Some more maintenance items with some ceiling replacements, and then you see here this ventilation system. So it's to provide cooling to the entire building. So here is an example. If we broke the potential bond issue out into two different subsets of projects, that this would be in that second subset because it has to do with the cooling. Some bathroom reconstruction, renovating remaining bathrooms, and again, some money for ADA accessibility. 22.4 million over for Lido at the middle school. Now we go to Lindell. The big ticket item here is replacing the existing bulkhead. It needs work, right? You take a look at what's happening along the waterfront throughout Long Beach. It's time for Lindell to now fix its bulkhead. You see some bulkhead improvements on either side of the site. Playground and athletic field reconstruction. This came from the administrative team. What they'd like to do is to reconstruct some of the playgrounds. They'd like a walking and fitness track going around the area. Perhaps do some synthetic turf on the infields again, not the whole ball field, but just to make that infield, the integrity of the infield to remain almost weather resistant. New drainage, some backdrop, dugouts, etc. The community uses this field a lot too. So we know it's not just our school, but it's the community at large. Some maintenance items with some doors, some steps, auditorium renovation. If you go back in the back of Lindell, you'll see that it really needs work and it's not really safe. And we do have students and community groups using the storage back there, and they go up on metal ladders, and it really, right now it's off limits until we get it safer in terms of some of the rigging that we've been talking about and I've been telling the board about, but it actually does need some more work and renovation in that backstage area. And a kitchen sewer line replacement. It's just, we need a new sanitary line because what we have there isn't working properly. Just a basic maintenance issue. Some more at Lindell, perhaps put in an exterior single-stall bathroom. We've been seeing requests to have something that the community can access from outside of the building, some exterior lighting that we've seen that we can use, and then some flooring, something at the gym floor to replace that. It needs some work. And here, ventilation. There are 14 rooms, small instructional spaces that really need some ventilation work over at Lindell. So that's the price tag for that. And this 8.3 million is the actual cooling element, right? So we separated out what we need for ventilation versus what we need for cooling, and that's how that breaks out there. Just about $18 million for all this maintenance and educational enhancements at Lindell. At East School, we're talking about replacing the playground on the north side, some reconstruction of the playgrounds, again on that north side, putting in some turf to make it a greener area. We've spoken a lot about making it greener at East and at West. You'll see the same thing over at West. So doing some work on these playgrounds, and then some maintenance, the chimney, exterior doors, windows, carpet. We want to replace the remaining carpet that's in the building over at East. Some ceiling work that you see at a lot of the different buildings. And here, ventilation. This is, the big item here is that there is no mechanical ventilation at East. So we at least want to have mechanical ventilation there. And that's that one. And while we are doing that, of course, we'd like to add the air conditioning, because if you're going to go in there once to put in the ventilation, it makes sense to also add the cooling element. About $7 million total for East. Again, all these costs include the hard cost, which is a construction cost, and then the 18% for all these soft costs and contingencies. Let's talk about West Elementary School. A little more here for playground and athletic field. And the idea from the administrative team there was to really do a major overhaul that the school can use, also the community can use, in terms of basketball courts, adding in some turf, soccer fields, kickball fields. We need to do some drainage work here. And also a new Gaga pit, something that's very popular with the kids in the area. The team thinks that the kids over West School would really love that, and some new lighting. Sidewalk, the interior walls, the floors, the ceiling. Again, basic maintenance infrastructure items here. The ventilation. So West School has mechanical ventilation already, right? That differs from East and from the other buildings. Here is just to provide the cooling. So this 4.4 would again be part of that second element if we broke the overall bond issue and project scope into two subsets. It needs some hot water heater and some bathroom reconstruction. There is still a male and female bathroom that needs to be reconstructed. We have a beautiful new floor that our team recently did, but it needs to be renovated. $7 million about there at West School. Nike, basic stuff just to keep that building going. We have some wonderful BOCES related programs there, the medical assisting program. So we do have students accessing it, and we want to make sure it's safe. So exterior walls, steps and ramps, windows, interior doors, basic stuff over there in that building, some ventilation, bathroom reconstruction, and some exit fire alarms, electrical panels. Just about $500,000 over at Nike. The facilities department, again, you have to maintain the integrity of the buildings where we have, staff or students there. So these are all basic maintenance items, just shy of $400,000. And the transportation department, same thing. Roof replacement, the underground storage tanks need to be replaced, and some basic handicap accessibility, about 1.4. And then the public library, again, all basic building maintenance items, sidewalks, roofs, boilers, ADA compliance, windows, exterior caulking, plumbing, just to keep the building in good shape, just shy of $1.4 million. So as we consider a future bond issue, it's important to keep in mind that it's the bond issue, which is the way that you can get a lot of work done. The alternative is if you put a little bit of money in the operating budget every year, it's in that transfer to capital line, whether it's $500,000 or $2 million, but the tax levy has to absorb that. So that's the difference, is that we have to increase the tax. We do get some building aid, but we do have to increase the tax levy in order to pay for it because of the way it works. It's part of the annual budget. The bond issue is a way that you can get a loan for it and you pay the debt service. So it's a very different way of financing capital projects. When there's a lot to do, when it's a big ticket, like you see here, especially to do the air conditioning or to do some of these educational enhancements or the basic maintenance, it's hard to do that year after year in the operating budget. It's good for long-term planning. It's also good. We're retiring debt service, right? Coming up in a couple of years, you'll see it on the next slide. And it's always good to replace that retiring debt service. With new debt service, it keeps the maintenance of our district in a good state of repair. If we keep it at about the same level, right, and our target number is under 87 million, then it has no tax impact, right? So it wouldn't be anything additional in the tax levy to support this debt service because we already have that in there already. You see about 5.4 is going to retire at the end of 2025-26. Then 2 years later, 2.6 million, that's our total debt service of about $8 million. We already have it in the budget, right? It's already covered through the tax levy, so it makes sense to replace it. If the board decides it wants to move forward with some of this work before this debt service retires, we have an option of going forward with short-term financing. It's called a bond anticipatory note. And what we do is that let's just say we go out for a vote this May, okay? Once the drawings are done and they're submitted to the state and we're ready to start doing the work, we are then allowed to go out for a short-term financing to do whatever scope of work we say we're going to do over that next year or 2 years. We only have to pay the interest on that. We don't have to pay the principal, and that's the difference. We can roll over the principal until we actually do the bond to coincide with the retiring debt service that we have here. So when I talk about going into these two different subsets, what it does is it provides greater flexibility and transparency to the community to say, okay, community, we're identifying, let's say for argument's sake, $85 million worth of needs, but we don't have to put it all in one proposition. We can put it in two. So maybe you don't want to do air conditioning, or maybe you just want to do air conditioning, or maybe you're comfortable doing both, the maintenance, the ventilation, the educational enhancements, but you don't want to do the air conditioning. It just gives more choice. So the way I would break it up is that, let's call it Proposition A, contains all the building maintenance needs and the ventilation for East School and a few of those spaces in Lindell, which equals about $64 million. And then proposition B would be just the air conditioning for the rest of the middle school, Lido Elementary, Lindell, and West, which is about $20.5 million. So that's one logical way to break it up so that it's a very clear message to the community. All of what we feel is needed for the infrastructure and the ventilation is here in A, and then for the air conditioning part is B. I'm not saying that one is necessarily, more important than the other, but it is a way of separating out the work. So one other thing, this is the last slide for this evening that I want everyone to think about, is that costs are going to escalate, right? So already we have an 8% factor in the costs that were just mentioned by each building, and that has to do for unforeseen conditions, but also if costs go up a little bit. But we may want to put in another cost escalation factor of 3% to get up to that about 87 million, just to keep it under, to have a net no tax impact. What that does is it then gives the district the authority to borrow up to this amount, not for any additional scope, but knowing that prices may go up. What happens if we don't have this kind of escalation and costs do go up, construction costs, then we have to reduce our scope. So that's something for the board to consider as well, that if we don't have an additional escalation factor, if it turns out that we go out to bid and costs are high, we have to reduce the scope because we only have the authority to borrow this number, about that $84 million number. There's one thing that I do want to talk about, and I said I want to talk about it a little bit. Hang on a second. Let me just go back. Later, I said put an asterisk at some of these things in the high school, is that, so tomorrow a group of us is going to the Harbor School and Governor's Island to take a look at their environmental education programs. We've spoken, and in the strategic planning process, some of the comments that emerged was that we really want more outdoor education. We've also know that we want to do something with science research, and we've been talking about maybe putting in some sort of an in-house science research lab or capacity in the building. So if we do something like that, we still have a little bit of room before that 87 million, right? We have about $3 million of play there if we don't have that 3% cost escalation. But the alternative is to scale back, maybe not do the turf replacement as part of the bond issue, maybe not to do the bleacher replacement. There are certain items that, sure, it would be nice to replace it, but we can wait a little bit. So there's something else to think about that, this again is not the last presentation on capital project, but if we say, you know what, we really want to do this amazing thing for the high school in terms of science research or in terms of outdoor learning, let's say, we leave a couple of more weeks to develop that. Let's say it comes in at 1 million and the board says, we don't want to go to that max of 87 million, or we want to give us some room if costs escalate. So let's forego this line item or a different line item. There is some play there, okay? And this is why we present this not just in one night, but we present it over a series of board meetings, over a series of nights, because there's a lot to think about, right? And then I know that going back to the last slide, in terms of the timing, right? When do we go out for the bond? Do we go out this May and do the short-term borrowing? Because we do know that once we get the approval, once we do the designs, once it goes up to New York State, it does take about a year to get the approvals. So you're not going to start for at least 2 years anyway. So how much further can we push things down the line? How much further along is the board comfortable saying, no, we're not going to start on the air conditioning or the ventilation or some of these repair items or this new exciting, in-house science research lab that we're talking about and we're exploring, and we're willing to wait 4 or 5 years until this actually falls off. And then we submit the plans, and then we get the approvals, and then we start the work. So that's really something for the board to consider, is what's your comfort level with the timing? Knowing that, yes, there is a cost of short-term borrowing for this ban, and it's the interest rate right now, maybe about 6%, and you are paying interest on the amount borrowed. It wouldn't be the whole 85 million, but whatever we do borrow for, let's say, 1 or 2 years worth of work. And so these are the big conceptual things for the board to think about. You've seen how, again, over the past 2 years, we've been talking about this, how some of the maintenance items are laid out, how some of the educational enhancements items are costed out and how it goes by building, where we are with our total cost. How do you want to deal with this cost escalation of waiting to do the work? And then there's the cost of borrowing the money, right? So that's the full picture. I'm happy to answer questions that the board may have about some of these issues that I've laid out. And now's a good time for questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. DeVito. Board discussion, session topic? Capital project? Ms. Brown?
No one else has anything to say?
I'd like you guys to go first before I go.
Well, I actually would like to hear from the subcommittee people, what they're thinking about, because you actually sat in meetings on this. So if you could give us your thoughts about it, that would help.
So we had a subcommittee of this, Mr. DeVito, myself, Ms. Conway on occasion, Don from Facilities, the architect, and part of the team from the business office. What we originally had presented to us was a lot more options that we were able to pretty much look at what the necessities were, what the cons, the pros were of each of the projects. And we kept in mind that we want to do these projects in line for when that tax, I guess the debt falls off the tax rolls. That way we don't have a positive, actually a negative impact on higher costs for the taxpayer. So we had a lot more things that we introduced that we thought were good ideas, great concepts for the district, but weren't really as necessary as the other projects. We wanted to do more with outdoor facilities. We wanted to do more that increases educational experience for the students, but we also wanted to make sure that we balance that for the needs of the community. Big parts of the projects we thought was important was obviously equity with outdoor space for East School and West School, because a lot of the students like outdoor space and green space, and it's kind of limited to those two schools. That was a high priority. Also the maintenance, and we have to have sewer lines fixed, we had to have infrastructure concepts fixed, we had to fix the bulkhead in Lindell, and air conditioning was also a big topic for us. So we had maybe probably a dozen more high-ticket and medium-ticket size items that were applicable to capital improvement that we whittled away from, and now we're presenting this larger plan to the rest of the board and to the public for their input.
Thank you, Mr. Pinto. And thank you to all of us on the committee. You're absolutely right, because everything that we thought about with the capital projects committee was student engagement. We also talked about if we fix things and we maintain them, then they won't break and won't cause more money, more problems later. Would any trustees like to ask questions now before I comment further, or no?
You could go.
I just have,
If you'd like me to go, I'll go.
no,
Here, okay.
it's okay. The only thing I wanted to know about, when you talked about things that can wait, like, why did you say that we can wait on them and they're up there? Like,
So
because I assume that when we discussed all of these items, that they were in desperate need of being maintained and fixed.
So it's a matter of degree. Like, what do you mean by desperate, right? So let's just take the turf replacement, for example. We know, and Mr. Grillo is here, who's our architect, chime in, you feel you need to fill in. It should be replaced 10 to 15 years. It usually has a lifespan of about 10 to 15 years. If it's well maintained, and if there isn't huge wear and tear, maybe you could extend that, right? How much? I don't know. But that may be an example of, okay, maybe we wait till 17 years. Maybe we wait till 18 years on that one. And because we feel it's more of a priority to go with a new in-house science research lab, right? They're all trade-offs. So everything that's been identified needs to be done. Does it need to be done tomorrow? I wouldn't say it needs to be done tomorrow, then it would be an emergency, right? But it's good planning to have it in this presentation. We're talking about a bond, to put it in the bond, because it's a costly item and it's harder to absorb that in an annual tax levy operating budget type of environment. So it's in something like this. But I do know that the board has said, we really want no tax impact.
Right.
But we're already pretty close to that $87 million mark. And as you know, being part of the committee, we did say certain things that were identified. We said we can't afford it. right? One of the things that came up was a wrestling gym, some new auxiliary gym for the high school, health and wellness, fitness center, more meeting space. These were things that were brought to us as requests that we said, we'd love to do it, but we want no tax impact, so we have to stay within that $87 million ceiling. I also know that there are a couple of ideas that we still need to flesh out between now and the final decision on the bond scope. So if we need to say, we need to pull something out, there may be a few, not everything, a few items that we can say, we can wait a few more years on that. We can defer that for a few years. But I also know that, and what I'm concerned about is cost escalation. Now, these are the costs now, right, Mr. Grillo?
Correct.
If we wait 4 or 5 years, I don't know where the costs are going to be in 4 or 5 years. And I'm concerned about that because we have $3 million as a buffer before there's a tax impact. I don't know where costs are going to be. And then at that point, we are going to have to cut back on scope because we only have authorization to borrow a certain amount of money. We go out to bid, all of a sudden, let's just say, for example, we go out to bid on this cafeteria reconstruction. We wait 4 years, it comes up at $2.5 million. Well, that's, $700,000 increase. What are we going to do? What are we going to cut out? What are we going to cut back? I can't predict what the prices are going to be in 4 or 5 years. I just know from experience that the longer you wait, the more you pay for things. It's rare that things become cheaper, especially in this environment. So I want us to be prepared for that. So when talking to Mr. Grillo and saying, if we had to push, if we had to defer something, what do you think we could defer? Go ahead, try me.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. When we did a lot of the maintenance items started in the 2020 building condition survey. You were fortunate to stay on the track of the 2020. Remember the building condition surveys at every 5 years? And then in 2020, the state spread it out. You happen to be one of the lucky districts that actually stayed on course. So in 2020, we added the turf replacement as it could go out another 5 or 6 years. But as we started to talk about a bond 3 or 4 years later, I added it to the bond, knowing that a capital project of this magnitude will take 3 or 4 or 5 years. I put it in, knowing that it's fine now. It meets what's called the GMAC test. We're well within range of the GMAC test. I think we're at last we're like 160, and anything over 200 we have to replace. So we're well there. But if we start to prioritize, if we decide to go with a bond, then we prioritize within the bond year 1, 2, 3. It still should be done within that bond, but it would be towards the end of the bond. But it wouldn't last more than, I've never had a turf field last more than 12 years.
So then maybe that's not a good one to say it's out of the bond.
Yeah, because I think someone would come back and say, you had a chance to do a bond, why'd you pull that out? There were some other ones that I could by all means go through and take a look at them. Like, I think we had talked, I think Mr. Pinto, you had talked about, originally we had looked at, more turf at Lindell, we scaled that back, Lido, making just turfing the infield, so because the clay, once clay gets wet, you can't play baseball or softball, so we did natural grass there, kind of some things like that. So I can work with Mr. DeVito on that.
But it wouldn't be a lot, I'm saying, because,
Yeah.
it's not like anything in there is something we don't need to do. It's just like what I'm saying is I'm looking for just maybe $1 million more, maybe 1.5 million more just to do some of these projects that we're exploring right now. That didn't make it to the list because it wasn't fully costed out and fully developed by tonight, So that's why I said it's not a lot here, right? Now, again, we have that $3 million buffer. We're out 84.5, right? And we said kind of that mark is under 87. But then I'm also concerned about, okay, we start doing the work 3-4 years from now. What's the cost going to be? What are we then going to have to say? Oh, now we don't have money to do this. And I think we just need to start thinking about that. So maybe it makes more sense to say now, okay, maybe we scale this back and give us a little bit of room to now know that at least we have room to do the work that we all feel this is the work we want to do. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Would the work be done in the prioritized order, or would the work all be done at once?
Absolutely no. We can't do it all in one summer, right? So, and we usually like to do it in the summer. So it would probably take, what do you say, 2 to 3 summers to do all the work?
Yeah, because I mean, we're limited to, 9 new windows. But something like, let's say, for example, at East, we have to run all new piping because there's no piping there. So from September to June, the contractors would work evenings. They would run the piping, they would run the electric above it in the ceilings and in the crawl spaces and stuff during the second shift. And then in the summer, they would cut the holes in the exterior wall and they would put the unit vents in and connect everything together. So that would be a year-long project, but they would have to work around the student schedule. We have to work around summer programs. I mean, now, these enrichment programs, these summer programs, we couldn't cripple the school district and work in every building and every summer, so we really have to work hand in hand with the district. There's summer programs and all of those things, sports camps. I mean, every year we try to do work at the high school, and it took us 2 or 3 years to do site work at the high school, because we had to kind of work alongside the summer camps and the sports programs.
So what you do is, if the board decides to go forward with a bond issue, right, we get the approval, we go to the community, we get the approval to do the overall work. We have the authorization to borrow, but we don't borrow it all at one time. We then take a look at the schedule, we take a look at the scope, like we did in the last bond issue, right? We did it in 2 different, what they call tranches, right? We borrowed 62 million, then we borrowed later on 30 million, because the total borrowing was about 92 million. So we did it a couple of years later because we knew that you had to pace it. So the similar thing would happen here. So of course, that first group of work would be done, figuring out what can we do in those first 2 years, those first 2 summers, and then we'd space that out. But again, if the board decides to go forward this May with a vote, we're not probably going to start anything until summer of 25, possibly summer of 24, but most likely summer of 25. You push that out another year, and we're not starting until summer of 26. You push it out 2 years, etc. Then you're not starting any of the work. And then again, everything gets pushed down the line. So it's a tough one, right? I'm not saying it's an easy decision. It's a tough one because I know there's a desire to do certain projects. There's a desire to keep pace, but I know it's also a little bit scary and unsettling to think about going out for a bond because we need the community support. We need to go out for, a proposition on the ballot. So that's the full picture of it. There's the risk of cost escalation if we wait longer. There's the factor of things getting a little bit more worn out and deteriorated if we wait longer. And then on the nice kind of fun and educational enhancement projects is waiting longer to get those kind of programs and that type of infrastructure in our buildings. So that's the weighing. And then if we do it sooner, there is the cost of short-term financing. There is a financing cost to whatever it is that we decide to borrow at whatever time until we actually do the full bond. There is that short-term interest-only cost. So it's all part of the picture of talking about a bond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
One of the things I forgot to bring up, I apologize, was when we were doing the consideration for the fields, the maintenance cost for the grass fields now and the clay and the infields is considerable, especially with all the rain that we've been getting. So if we go to turf, it'll improve drainage too, correct? And that'll also maintain continuity of clear surface, because every time it rains, the grass shifts a little bit and people can get hurt, and it's also involved with.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent money over the years to keep our fields in good shape, but it does cost money. Like we did, we did recrowning recently. We've done different things over the past couple of years at the middle school and at Lindell.
Maintenance has costs too, which would be lowering the maintenance cost if we shifted over to a different service.
Yeah. I don't know if the annual maintenance is that high compared to what we already put into to really reconstruct it. I mean, Don, maybe you can speak about or John, you can speak about what those annual maintenance costs are, but I don't know if that annual maintenance cost is very high compared to what we spent to actually reconstruct those areas.
Well, we have our groundsmen who are hired full-time for us, and they're on our payroll, and they do their job. The cost of redoing, maintaining, it's just.
After a rain, right. Yeah, so I don't think there's that, additional cost there.
Ms. Verona?
Thank you for the presentation. It seems quite ironic to me, just to start off, because I got a lot of questions, but it seems kind of ironic to me that we're talking about outdoor spaces and classrooms and gaga pits and being the kids wanting to be in the environment, and then we're gonna artificially turf all our fields. Something just doesn't seem right to me there. So I guess my first question is, sometimes we do the whole field, sometimes we do the whole field, sometimes we leave it in its natural state, natural surface. How do we ascertain when we're gonna do something artificial and when we're gonna synthetic turf or versus natural state surface? How is that determination made?
Sure, good question. So we know that it's easier to make sure that the field of play is intact and safe, let's say, in terms of even and more reliable for play if it's turf, okay? So we usually save that for the more advanced players, so at the varsity level, the junior varsity level, at the high school for the most part. That's why we're proposing softball and baseball fields to be fully turfed. We also know that some of our other areas, like at East School and West School, need some sort of green space, and it's easier for the maintenance, and John, you can, chime in, to put a small turf field there as opposed to growing natural grass.
So that's artificial turf. We're
Yeah.
giving our children a green space that's artificial
Yeah.
turf.
It's still green, it's still playable versus cement versus asphalt,
Okay, I understand.
there's still a value, yeah. I
okay.
hear what you're saying, but there's still, we feel anyway, a value of adding a turf play space versus an asphalt space, right? Now, John, excuse me, can you talk a little bit about, in making that choice of, let's say at East or West, natural grass versus turf? I think with the way the kids are playing on it, it would just get beaten up and kind of torn up if it were natural grass. It'd
That's
be
what
hard to
happens
make.
when kids play on dirt and grass.
My plan there was to go with the synthetic turf, but not the synthetic turf you see with the crumb rubber and it gets all over it. It would be sand-based. It's not gonna be football and that kind of stuff. It's gonna have a shock pad. Because when I talked to the building principals and they said they just do kickball, I know on a Saturday, kids are gonna come there and it's gonna start with the light game and it's gonna wind up being two-hand touch turning into flag football, turning into tackle football. And Mr. Bowles is gonna yell at me for putting a turf field in that the kid's gonna break an arm on. So it's gonna be a synthetic turf, but it's not gonna be crumb rubber. It's gonna have a shock pad. It's gonna be, we're gonna get something good on there, but it's not gonna be the crumb rubber 2.5 inch thick turf there. But it's not, I just don't know if natural grass is gonna be the right setting for that, because when the kids go out at recess and it rains and they still go out, they're little guys. I think it's just gonna be a better environment for those little guys to be on a synthetic turf that's not with the crumb rubber. That's just, that's my opinion. It's in there on a broad stroke term that we have, we literally have 2 years to decide what the end result could be. So I'm not concerned about that. We could talk about this. I could bring in options. I have samples of every type of infill known to mankind. So I can bring that to you guys and we can talk about it and meet with Dr. Gallo and go through all of those options.
But I think that main decision was just knowing the condition that it may be on a day-to-day basis, considering the use of it.
And see what's going on underneath the asphalt. I don't know what's living underneath there. We want to take a look and see what's going on. Not living, but
Okay, let's stay with, okay, what I wanna do is I wanna go backwards.
Okay.
If you pass a bond in May of 2023,
Yes.
when would you do your first borrowing?
So let's talk about that. So we passed the bond, the overall bond. You do the drawings. They go up to the state. We get our approvals. What chance is there that we'll start the work in summer of 24?
So right now we're dealing with two big delays. Since 2017, we've been dealing with one big delay. That was SED. That was the backlog at SED. It started with architects and engineers. They had no help, and at the peak it was 38-week backlog. They kind of fixed the architect and engineering thing, and now the project manager, which has now changed their title to called fiscal associates, now they're very backlogged. So overall backlog at SED is about 24 weeks. Once we get approval, anything that has a moving part, electrically, mechanically, anything like that, 36 weeks, 46 weeks, 60 weeks out. So anything that if we go through on that list that we have to order, that has to be manufactured, we'll push that out the summer of
25.
So site work, ceilings, flooring, some of those quick hit projects that the community can see right away, we would try to get some of those projects up quickly to the state. They're not a big review, and even if we got our approval in February or March,
Of
we can
24.
still get them done in the summer of 24. Because I know what it's like for a board, you get something approved in May, and then it's not until 2 summers, and people say, we approved something in May, why is something not getting done? I mean, we could probably get, if we got East, West, and Liddell's fields done in the summer of 24 with some asbestos floors or some ceiling and lighting, it'll go a long way because it's something simple, but the community's gonna see it right away.
So if we then do a cost for
Those big
that,
numbers,
so I don't know,
those would be summer of 25. and
10 million? What, 10 million?
Yeah, maybe.
So in order to do that work in the summer of 24, we would need to have cash available on hand to the tune of about $10 million to pay the bills, right? So we may want to do some sort of short-term borrowing, right? We could push it to the fiscal year, not the 23-24 fiscal. So if we need to start paying the bills, let's say in August, we could put it in the 24-25 fiscal year, right? So that's when we would start borrowing in that 24-25. Usually you delay paying the interest till the end of the year. So maybe we wouldn't have, this is all kind of this whole art of this is that maybe not till the following fiscal year because we can wait maybe until August to pay the interest. So then it pushes into a different fiscal year. So it may not hit.
So it is not going to be budget neutral until at the very earliest, June 30th, 2026. That's
Right.
just a fact. So whatever, the faster you do it and the more money you borrow before June 30, 2026, the taxpayer's gonna be paying.
Except, right, if we stay under that 87, right, 87 million, and let's say that interest is $200,000, right? That $200,000 tacked onto an $85 million project still makes the whole program tax neutral, right? It made the time,
Eventually,
yes,
it's
yeah,
not
overall.
tax neutral while you're paying for the bond anticipation note.
Correct. If it doesn't fall after that
So-
time, right?
Why would you pass the bond anticipation? So then
Right.
let's just take my scenario,
Right.
which is you put it on May of 24.
Uh-huh.
And then you do all the stuff that Mr. Grillo just spoke about in the summer of 25. All of a sudden, you're in the 25-26 school year, you're closing in on that. So you're gonna have less than a year of paying 6% on whatever it is, on $10 million. You're gonna have 1 year of it instead of 2 years of it. So we're just trying to push this stuff through faster, which brings me, I guess, to my biggest problem with the whole presentation. I feel like I have no idea what the priorities are, what needs to be done, what can be taken out. I didn't get that going through this. I felt like I was looking at a wish list.
Well, it's certainly not a wish
Things to be
list.
done.
Yeah.
So I,
Well, everything
a
needs to be
priorities
done.
list.
Everything needs to be done. The way Mr. Grillo just explained it, though, is how we pace the work really depends on SED, right? Not so much on the priority of the project. So everything needs to be done. Everything's been identified as in either the building condition survey as a need that in order to maintain our infrastructure, or as we've identified those that came from the building administration saying, we really think this is going to enhance our program, right? The only thing that I was talking about in terms of perhaps delaying something is I know something has just come up, right? Something has just come up about maybe putting in an in-house science research lab. We're still talking about this, so it doesn't make sense to just ignore that, right? And say, oh, well, it's too late, because it's not too late. We're still talking about this whole bond project. So if we do want to incorporate this in-house science research lab at the high school, let's just say for argument's sake, it's $1 million, right? Well, yeah, we have room, right? Because overall, we're just talking about an 84 round numbers, $0.5 million project. So we have room before we get to that 87. But what happens if we don't do this work all at once? Because we're not going to, and something comes in of a higher cost. What then? A few years from now, we're going to have to say we can't afford it.
But go back for a second.
All
We
right.
just talked about, you put the bond on in May of '23, right?
Right.
This coming
Right.
May. And you don't borrow the money until a year later in the summer,
Or 2 years, depending.
okay? You're still gonna pay the cost escalation. It doesn't matter if you pass the bond now or in May of 2024. It's gonna cost you whatever it's gonna cost you when you borrow the money. So you're talking 2 years out.
But at least it's 2 years out as opposed to 4 years out, right? Or 3 years out. It's a timing issue, right? It's if we make the decision this May, we go on track for that. Yeah, there's some short-term borrowing cost that overall I still think is going to be no tax impact, right? Overall for the program. But if we delay it, and we certainly can do that, there's more of a risk because we're further away from knowing what the costs are 3-4 years from now versus what we know today. It's just a question of waiting another year. Maybe they go up. I don't know what percentage. Maybe they don't go up that much at all. We just don't know. The further, though, that you wait on this, then it becomes more of an unknown. So let's say we wait another year. We come back, we talk about this, let's say next November. I'll ask Mr. Grillo, how are the prices doing? You just laid out all these costs. I don't know what he's going to say. Maybe the same, it may go up. Now we have to think, okay, now what's going to happen 2 years from next year? It creates a larger unknown because we're further out from actually doing the work, paying the bills, borrowing the money. In terms of what needs to be done, like immediately, right? Like I said, I think if anything that we said, it needs to be done today, it wouldn't be part of this, right? Right, because we've come to you, when we've had emergency expenditures. I think at the last board meeting, we said, we had a situation that happened at the middle school. We had a situation that happened at that school. We weren't expecting it. It was an emergency. We needed to address it right away.
In addition to that, we took a lot of money out of the capital reserve. We've been doing capital.
We
money.
have.
We have
We
not,
have.
before
That's right.
the 2009 bond issue.
That's right.
This district had not put any money into infrastructure and maintenance of infrastructure
Right.
for years. And that has not been true in the last decade.
You're right.
So to me, it's surprising that we have $86 million or $84.5 million of stuff that needs to be done because we have been doing this stuff as we go along.
May I respond to that?
Of course.
So yes, you're right. We have been doing work every single year and we have been using capital reserve money. But if you recall, back 15 years ago when the district was talking about a bond issue, the district building facilities committee identified $350 million worth of need. Some of it may have been wish listy stuff,
I was
but
on that
yeah,
committee.
so so 350 million. Yeah. So yes, but on the one hand, let's go back to the cafeteria, right? So do we need to completely reconstruct that cafeteria to make it less cavernous? No, we don't need to. It's been identified as something some students avoid going to the cafeteria because it feels too overwhelming for them. It doesn't feel like a place that's approachable. Everybody, when we had that meeting with the high school, said, please, if we can do something in our building, let's do something for the cafeteria. Was that part of the building condition survey that we did 2 years ago? No. Was the fax reconstruction, the old home ec room? Yeah. That was identified because it really needs new appliances, it really needs new casework, and that was identified here, right? So it's both, right? Most of this that's in here is that building condition survey, but I presented in November, I think I came up with about $60 million we came up with just from the building condition survey. There's another $25 million in cafeteria, locker rooms, things that we know are conditions in our high school that we would like to have improved, whether it's the cafeteria or the locker rooms. So if we're going to do a bond, right, now is the time that you do it. If we're not going to do a bond, then you don't do something as big as a whole, a $4 million locker room construction or a $5.2 million baseball and softball field reconstruction. But if you're going to do it, and you're going to do it to replace retiring debt service, these are the kinds of things that you put in it, right? So,
Then why
yes,
are
we,
we talking about it 3 years before we're retiring the debt service? That's really my only
Yeah.
question.
because there is an opportunity to do it, right? So if there was any desire on the part of the board to do these projects sooner rather than later, there is a mechanism out there that allows us to do it. So, we've been hearing for a couple of years that we want to do something about the ventilation at East School. We want to do something about air conditioning our buildings. And we've been hearing that at meetings over the past few years. And the question was asked, and I, as always said, we have debt service retiring in a few years. We could always do it then. What can we do sooner than that? So there's a mechanism through these bond anticipatory notes where you just pay the interest on whatever it is that you borrow, and you don't borrow the whole amount, right? So it's these little bits of money as you need it so that we can do some of the work sooner. It's a mechanism, it's an opportunity. Do we have to do it? No. It's just my job of informing the board of what choice they have, what opportunities they have to do the work that would be replacing this debt service, and when it retires, to do it sooner. That's all. It's just laying out options.
Okay, no, not done. Okay, why is on page 6, there's a turf field replacement under Long Beach High School for $785,000 to replace existing turf on Veterans Field? And then on the first page of the Lido LBMS, it says turf field replacement of existing turf on Veterans Field, and there's another $785,000.
Two different fields. One is,
They're both called Veterans Fields?
I'm sorry, one should have said alumni. I corrected that, Mrs. Brown, I'm sorry. I may have made that correction after I submitted that to the
Oh, okay,
packet.
so-
One's alumni, I caught that afterwards.
Okay.
One's alumni and one's
Okay.
Veterans Field.
Now, I noticed here that we're gonna spend, or potentially spend about $2 million on courtyard reconstruction / outdoor learning at the Lido Elementary and Middle School. And you spent some significant time talking about those enhancements. Where are those outdoor learning enhancements at East School and at West School, even at Lindell School where they have some land? I don't see on any of these lists any outdoor learning enhancements in any building except for the Lido complex.
Yeah, we're limited with space.
Well, not at Lindell, you're certainly not limited at space. So
Could
we're
I
gonna,
just interrupt you, but I think what Mrs. Rona is talking about is really for the middle school, not for Lido Elementary. It's a Lido complex, but the clubhouse was for.
Right.
so we're not concerned about outdoor, we're concerned about artificial turf.
No.
K6.
No,
And then you
what
get.
I'm saying is that I think the renovation of the asphalt areas and the installation of more appropriate play areas at East, West, Lindell, and Lido are similar. We're not doing one school over the other.
So like there won't be any opportunities for outdoor learning at West or East, there won't be any at
No,
Lido either?
there are.
There are?
In those, that's why they want to turf that asphalt area, will create more opportunities for outdoor learning.
While it's also serving as a soccer field and a gaga pit and a place for kids. I feel like there's not gonna be any place to run out. I mean, it's not that big of a space for goodness sake. Whatever, okay, I'm just, all right, so are the artificial turf gonna have outdoor list? Okay, now when, on this auditorium renovations at Lindell for $500,000, it says replace the stage and house lighting. Is that gonna buck up the work that's being done right now? Is that work gonna have to be redone, or will that be able to be salvaged, or it's completely separate?
Separate.
Okay.
Yeah, I have your stage rigging is in the process of being replaced, so.
Right, I saw that, but.
Yeah, it's separate, it's separate.
But it doesn't, but 2 years down the road, if you're gonna come to the board and say, by the way, we need to
Yeah.
spend another whatever we're spending on the stage rigging right
Yeah,
now. And okay, in Lindell.
Yeah, just so
when
you know,
was the gym
Mrs. Verona,
floor
if I might just respond more generally, I did have a discussion. I said, anything that we're doing now, please tell me that nothing is going to be in vain, so to speak, or then have to be scrapped because of, and then they assured me that no, it's all, yeah.
When was the gym floor replaced last in Lindell? I think it's since I've been on the board.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever really been.
That gym is the last was restored put in was 1936.
Parquet
That's
floor,
the
right?
original.
Well, it has the kind of floor where the planks are kind of dug in, so it has that
So it
interesting.
hasn't been replaced.
No, it may have been refinished, Mrs. Ronan.
2x4s on it.
Yeah, the 2x4s are right there. You know, one of the things is that wasn't damaged in Hurricane Sandy, right? Because it was raised up. Yeah, it's an original floor.
And I didn't understand your explanation about why it was gonna be 1.1 million to improve ventilation in 14 existing small instructional spaces, separate and apart from AC.
Sure. So there are some small spaces in Lindell
Like what? Like little classrooms, closets?
that maybe probably originally they weren't really designed to be used as student space. I can't tell you what it was designed for in 1939, but now we are using it for some small instruction, and it needs ventilation. So there are these 4 areas that 14 rather, I'm sorry, I was thinking 14 in my head. 14 areas that need this type of ventilation. That's really not air conditioning. It needs the ventilation because it doesn't have that mechanical air. Now, the other areas in Lindell do, right? Most of the classrooms do, but there are these 14 areas throughout that whole building that are smaller, that really weren't probably originally intended to be a classroom, that are being used for students, and they should have some kind of mechanical ventilation.
And Mr. DeVito, Ms. Verona before said she didn't know what was important here. But what is most important out of this whole thing are the ventilation projects. Because with the new unit that will be going in, you have upgraded filtering, new filtering, more efficient machines. It's something that's important for the safety of the people who are breathing it. It's for the health of the building. Those are the most important things really on that whole list.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think my last question is, air conditioning of our buildings has been around for a while. I think since I got on the board around, like maybe that long, we've been talking about it. But I seem to remember the last time we talked about it, the number, and I could be wrong, I guess I must be, because I remember the number being $35 million to air condition the
Yeah.
district. And
Yeah.
now we were gonna have to wait until
Right.
the debt reserve retired because we weren't gonna. And now the bond issue, here we are with cost escalation,
Right.
with inflation, with COVID and
Yeah.
supply chain issues, and it's only costing $20 million.
Okay.
What happened?
Thank you for being such a good listener and reader. So I'm going to explain why. So part of it is the fact that for East.
That's still only another
All right.
foreign
Well,
change.
yeah. Well, hang on. Right. So East 5.2. Right. So that was part of that other number. Okay. Part
No.
of it-
Oh, so you're gonna, whoa, when you fix the mechanical ventilation at East as part of the main bond, you're also gonna air condition
Right.
East? The very thing that the board said they didn't wanna do, you're gonna air condition one building?
Because, right, if we're going to do the work, it doesn't make sense to not put the cooling.
I
Yeah,
understand.
that's our proposal. Right. Yeah, that's our proposal. If we're going to go in.
So that's still only 25.
All right, hang on. Lindell. So this 1.1 would have been part of that 35. The middle school.
$5 million to the state.
Right. Part of that work we had already approved, right, this past May. That's already up for the state. Those areas where we needed to replace the steam piping for the hot water. And we said, if we're going to put in the new hot water system for those areas, I think it's the music area, the gym, the cafeterias, maybe the 70s hallway, it doesn't make sense to do everything and not put in the cooling piece. So we're putting in the cooling piece. So that was already partially done. This,
And one more,
go ahead.
let's see if you can figure it out. Come on. The high school,
Thank you.
we kept in A because.
Right, and here's another 7.1 million because the building already has air conditioning in it. So it makes sense that we really need to fix and upgrade that. It's not like new air conditioning, it really becomes more of a building infrastructure system. And so we made that decision to put that in A. So we had a logic to it, whether you agree or not, we had a logic
All right,
to
so
it.
when we were talking 35 million, you didn't need to put in replacing air handlers from the high school. That wasn't part of the project, didn't even include the high school. Because the
That
high
was in
school's
the
already air
original, that was part of the original 1961 or 62. They were original to the building, but they provided HVAC.
All right, okay.
Yeah, so that's the 35, that's the 35.
You guys were like, I feel like we got like the wool pulled over our
No, we're not, no, we're
Because
not.
replacing air handlers and putting air conditioner in buildings that don't have air conditioning, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Well, we're trying.
Thank you all. I vote that we not have the bond issue until May of 2024, just in case anybody hasn't heard that.
Well, we're not voting on it tonight. We were just starting with our discussion.
In case I can't get it.
Ryan?
I don't have much to say. I just want to thank you for your presentation tonight. When we were elected as school board trustees, we were elected as students. And students in the sense of protecting the public interest, not that public interest in the buildings. So we fully realize our responsibility in that regard. Mrs. Roney, your last kind of piece sort of, I had teased out about 35 million in air conditioning in terms of the budget I had added up. And I'm saying, well, geez, we take 35 and subtract it from the 87, and maybe that might be more manageable. But then I understand that sometimes it doesn't make sense if you're gonna do one thing, it'd be more expensive if you do everything all at once rather than a piecemeal. But my single question is, how much in building aid will we get back? Is that too charitable enough?
Yeah, 42.4 of everything that's aidable. Everything is aidable except for maybe
Minus
one item, right?
The facilities department, the transportation are not aidable.
Right, so take out facilities, so take out about $2 million of this
About 80 million worth of projects.
42.4.
That
So every dollar we spend, we get 42 cents back
That lets us
in
pay
aid.
back the bond faster when we get that money back from state aid.
Well, it's the same aid that we're getting now, right? So we are getting that aid now on the, let's say the 87 million of debt service that's retiring, right? Because we did those refinancings, right? And we were able to reduce it. So let's say we have that $8 million of debt service every year, right? We do already get building aid on that to defray those costs. So that's the other flip side. If we don't do some sort of new borrowing, new construction work, 15-year payback, we lose that building aid. But if we're not doing any borrowing, we have no debt service, then there's no big deal, because we don't need the building aid to help defray it. So it's the same. It becomes a wash. It becomes a wash.
Certainly a significant factor.
Oh, yeah.
To consider in terms of this whole process.
Right.
I think the two most salient points mentioned tonight that I enjoyed was the comment you made during your presentation, Mr. Vito. When you said, and I quote, "This is not the last time we're going to be talking about capital projects." That's very, very true. I'm not in a position now, but I do, the number 84 or 87, whatever it's going to be, sort of scares me a little. And it scares me a little in terms of the context of the city and the fiscal state of the city, because although I know we're sort of an independent entity, the school district, taxpayers are certainly overburdened in town here. And I just have to be mindful of that in terms of exercising my responsibilities to do it. So I'm going to need some time to think about this in terms of that. But I appreciate your clarity you brought to it, because I know it's not easy. And I appreciate the backup. And I just wanted to ask one minor question, and it may have escaped me, and that is the sound system in both auditoriums. And it's certainly beyond my comprehension in terms of what's needed and what makes it easier for a presentation and what makes it easier for a play to record a play when it's going on, or a musical or something that's given in the venue. But are those accounted for in this budget?
It's already in process. We had approval for grant funding,
Right.
$250,000 for the upgrade of the sound system and lighting, middle school and high school, and that purchase order is already with the vendor, and we're waiting for installation.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one more question. If we get this approved by the public earlier, that is the earlier that we're able to send it out for bid.
Right.
So if we don't vote on it or put it out to public approval or denial, that'll just delay the bid process as well. So we can
Correct.
get earlier bids if we get
Correct.
guaranteed or denial from the.
Correct. That's the trade-off, right? That's the trade-off.
Thank you. Questions and comments from the public on tonight's work session topic only? Board of Education, new old business.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank, sort of echo what Mrs. Conway said. I also attended History Day. And I was quite impressed with the middle school presentations. I was very impressed with the variety of topics. They went from like Queen Elizabeth II to security post 9/11. They weren't the standard kind of topics that you'd usually see in a presentation like that. So I did want to commend the teachers and the students and the parents, because I'm sure somebody had to buy the oak tag. There was certainly a lot of oak tagging in the library that evening. It was a job well done. It was nice to see the students.
I would just like to say, Alexis, she was sorry that she could not be here tonight because she is sick. I hope she feels better. Any other comments? Oh, and Dr. John Ostroff is also sick, so that is why they are not here. Any other new business or business? Questions and comments from the public? Oh, 1 second. Thank you. I do have one more new business. So we all know that we have some traffic issues over here on Naval Boulevard, and I would like to ask the Board of Education to send a letter to Nassau County advocating for a crossing guard at Greenway Street and Naval Boulevard. Is there a consensus, and would anyone like to discuss it?
I think that's a great idea.
Great idea. Dr. Ryan?
Although, now, what are you going to say?
So is that a vote? We don't say yes? Motion, motion to send a letter?
Take the vote. I vote yes.
Thank you,
We need a vote, I vote.
thank you. Well, yes,
Is there a motion?
is there's
Yes,
motion,
there's a
any
motion,
second?
there was a second, and there was discussion.
Well, I don't know, there was a
Middle of the
motion,
vote.
there was a statement about consensus, but I vote yes. It's close enough, I
And I vote yes, thank you. All right, now questions and comments from the public. Long Beach Classroom Teachers Association,
No comment.
Administrative Supervisor and PBS Group,
No comment.
LBSEA, Long Beach Schools Employees Association, Group C. Parent Teacher Association, Student Organization. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Have a good night, everybody.
As long as you
Yeah,
got it.
all right. Bedtime, everyone.
Good night.